I'm Sienna. I'm the kid.
I'm Sarah. I'm the mom.
This is Queer Kid Straight Mom.
Let's talk. Welcome back to Queer Kid Straight Mom. Today we're talking about corporations and pride, which we have talked about before in terms of rainbow washing and whether, it's actually meaningful for businesses to have pride collections and pride lines and do all of that stuff. And that, it really only counts for doing something if they are also supporting LGBTQ people in other ways besides merchandise. The conclusion we came to before was that that's definitely better, but it's not bad for companies to want to show their support in that way. It's something. Things have changed a little since then. There has been so much backlash toward the LGBTQ community, which is not a surprise to anybody probably that listens to this podcast. And, a couple of really high profile boycotts. For example, Target had, people attacking employees and tearing down pride displays last year, and they have backed off a little. They don't have the same pride display in all of their stores, and it's a little harder to find the merchandise. According to data from Gravity Research, 78% of companies are not planning to change their pride strategies this year, but that means some are. 30% of companies within the consumer goods industry are considering adjusting their pride rollout this year. So again, as to the question of how much does that matter, Jon Stewart was on The Daily Show last week talking about this. I don't know if anybody saw it, but really kind of making fun of this pride merchandise. He referred to Pride Month as that time of year when corporations get together and financially exploit the decades-long struggle of gay people for acceptance and equality. He uses Target and Budweiser on his show as examples of companies that have backed off after they've faced backlash and boycotts. His point was really, who cares? These are hollow gestures anyway. But on this subject, there are differing opinions, depending on who you ask, as with most things. The silver lining is that some companies, instead of offering a pride collection this year, are focusing on year-round inclusion and support for the LGBTQ plus community. One of these brands is Nike. They have had pride merchandise in the past, specific lines. They are also a company that was hit with boycotts because they sent clothes to transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney. Yes, the same one who had people shooting cases of Bud Light in protest. But that's, in some people's minds, a really positive outcome of this, that companies might decide if there are more negatives than positives to having a pride display, having a pride collection, and focus on allyship and support behind the scenes instead, that's actually a positive, that is what we want people to be doing more than having those sort of hollow gestures.
Well, except to me that's kind of the right thing for the wrong reason, right? It's good to have year-round support and, to be doing things that are more meaningful than just look, we put a rainbow on golf clubs, or I don't know, whatever. But if you're doing it because you're scared of public backlash for your rainbow golf clubs, then that says to me that you're afraid of being a vocal ally, which is also not a good thing, right? Ultimately, it's you're listening to homophobes and transphobes instead of listening to the LGBTQ community. And if the LGBTQ community says, we would like you to do year-round support, and for the record, I don't think anyone is necessarily opposed to there being pride merchandise, but I think people are mainly focused on you should also do things year-round, and your pride collections should explicitly be linked to queer justice and queer causes. But if you're only doing that because you're scared of backlash, then you're not doing it out of motivation for what's best for the LGBTQ community. You're doing it because it's easier. And it happened to be easier in the past to just splash a rainbow on something. But now people might shoot cases of Bud Light, although they had to buy those cases of Bud Light in the first place. So maybe they were just really stocked up on Bud Light. True. It hurt them financially.
I know. I was completely surprised too. We'll link to a really interesting analysis from the Harvard Business Review about why this particular boycott like a lot of times companies will see a dip and then everybody forgets about it. But this one like actually endured. And it was an instance where it did hurt a company. And maybe that spooked everybody because in general, yeah, exactly what you said. It's all press is good press and it doesn't really hurt people financially. In some cases, it just brings them attention. And, if you look at something like Nike, look at your brother's track meets, all the college athletes wear the Nike spikes, right? Like if you're an athlete and you run in these shoes, like you're probably not going to go switch shoe brands when they make the spikes that everybody runs in, right? Whereas cheap beer is cheap beer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm losing a whole, economics thesis right here because that article did have some interesting stuff, including, substitutability, how easy, right? By I don't know, Corona. Although apparently Corona is a more liberal leaning brand anyway. So like whatever.
Corona's actually better. And but yeah, go out and buy Coors Light or whatever.
Yeah. And so that then leads to a brand like Bud Light being harder hit by a boycott. Again, interesting article. I also have to wonder though, like what the impact is in terms of, right, like in general, we've also just seen a decrease in alcohol consumption and alcohol sales generally.
I'm just going to interject. I would suspect, I have not researched this, I would suspect less so in those populations where you saw the biggest decline in Bud Light sales.
Well, right. But what that would mean is that you have the impact of a population that is like, no more Bud Light. They like trans people and they go and buy other cheap beer. But then you also have a dip that's in line with, a year-over-year trend that would then lead to a more sustained loss of revenue. So anyway, interesting phenomenon there.
Side note on economics. But yeah, I think there's an argument to be made that there has been a ripple effect. And, I also just want to point out that there are brands that have been doing the work behind the scenes as well as marketing for a long time. I have also linked to a Newsweek article that has a list. Some examples are Starbucks, 1-800-Flowers, Michaels, and Ulta Beauty have made really meaningful business decisions to hire LGBTQ people and support their community. And, I thought it was interesting, even Macy's, like they were dialing back the Pride stuff this year, but I saw that they were going to make an effort to feature more LGBTQ plus owned business. And, there are other things that people are doing that aren't as obvious, like making an effort to use queer models, just things like that. But so, yeah, like you said, a positive outcome from a negative thing. Like it's not good that we seem to be backsliding a little bit in willingness to stand up vocally for this community.
Yeah. And I saw something that I thought was kind of interesting. And I wasn't able to watch the full video because of Instagram weirdness. But it was a video that someone had made pointing out that like a lot of younger people have grown up seeing basically only this very superficial, like splashing rainbows all over the place and kind of cringy pride gear and all of that stuff. And so that's kind of the norm. And so it's then makes sense to criticize that. But for a lot of older queer people who, were around before that would ever be a thing that brands would consider doing, it is bringing up feelings of like a much bigger backslide than I think a lot of younger queer people are maybe cognizant of, because it's going back to the don't ask, don't tell kind of mentality that was really prevalent in the 90s and 2000s and before being queer was legal in many places in the United States.
Yeah. I'm curious they probably don't lose money by not having these lines because if they were doing it right, they were donating a lot of that money anyway. But, as a fashion person, like I get excited about new lines in general. What are they doing this season? And so I think for like some people, it's just I kind of liked seeing what designers did with Pride every year.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I think we were getting to an interesting place, in the last couple of years where brands were making much more of an effort to actually hire specifically queer content creators to develop their brands. And then there was all sorts of backlash over that last year with Target's collection because completely unrelated artwork that had nothing to do with Target. One time they drew Satan. So I think that sort of mucked that up. And now we've seen more accounts of artists being like, yeah, I was hired to do this line. And then they backed out or shrank at the last minute.
Well, that was going to be my next point, was the negatives of this. Talked about the silver lining. One of the big negatives is the LGBTQ plus content creators and nonprofits that are going to see, for the creators, a loss in work, and for both of them, a loss in revenue because the nonprofits aren't getting the money that came from those pride lines that the companies were donating. And yeah, these content creators that would be hired by businesses to do some of their online promotion and, partnerships and all of that kind of stuff, that goes away.
And it's actively hurting those creators, those artists, but it's also sad because we were seeing some really cool stuff all of a sudden. It wasn't just like a garish rainbow painted on something. Like there was some really cool design, and there still are, I should say. I think couple of brands that I think do a pretty decent job, including Gooder Sunglasses and Me Undies. Both, I get their promotional emails and they both had strong partnerships with queer creators this year and, creating some really cool stuff. But it's sad that companies, especially larger companies, are no longer interested in providing those opportunities to both artists and consumers.
Yeah, it really does sort of support Jon Stewart's point in that piece. If you watch the whole thing, he talks a lot about this isn't about you. This is about money.
Well, and I think something that really demonstrates that is if you look at those big box store type pride collections like Target and Walmart this year, they still have pride collections, but they're all beige. There are a lot of beige items and I don't know, overalls with I'm gay embroidered on them in tiny print. I don't know, super, super scaled back in terms of how obviously queer they are, which, while some people might appreciate because they don't want all of their clothes to be rainbow, which is fine, it also suggests that they're like, we can still profit off of having a pride collection, but also people won't come and start yelling at our rainbow section.
Yeah. Although Connor Clary does some really funny reviews of stores' pride collections. And I did see on his review of the Target collection this year that bird, is it a chicken?
I don't know what bird it is, but
the bird is back. And I think it might have a car or something.
It does. It has a car. I would buy the birds.
For whatever reason, people love this drag bird.
Well, it's not, because the thing is, it's not just a drag bird. Those birds show up in all of their seasonal collections. That's Irene's Halloween birds and the Christmas birds.
Oh, so there's, okay. So that's the seasonal.
Yeah.
Oh, I like it. Anyway, that one's a big hit. So
the other thing is that inexplicably, we still have absolutely hideous rainbow pinstripe clown looking trousers, because I guess concerns about too obviously rainbow go out the window when you can design clown trousers. I don't know. I don't understand, because surely those cannot have been the best selling items.
It's hard to imagine.
But brands just keep coming back to them.
Yeah. People are confusing. They just are. So anyway, bottom line, this seems to be a trend. And I guess our conclusion is more downsides than upsides.
Yeah. Because, right, the thing is, all of those upsides, you could be, doing year-round support. You could be doing year-round support also. It did not require all of this nonsense and boycotts and garbage. It's not necessary. You could do both.
Yeah.
I think my ultimate conclusion remains basically the same as last time, which is we don't want to dismiss the importance of bigger pride collections for the reasons we discussed earlier, right? In terms of visibility and all of that stuff. But also, corporations don't care about you. Corporations care about money. Go support queer creators directly. That's the best way to make sure that, your money is going to the people that you want to support, that it's not just going into the pockets of corporations who are also donating a bunch of money to anti-LGBTQ plus politicians in the first place. Yeah, ultimately, I think that point still stands.
That's an excellent point. let's, in the next week or two, share some artists and creators from the queer community that you're a
Yes.
fan of. We'll share some of those on social media so you can check out their work.
Excellent.
As always, we'd love to hear your comments, particularly if anybody has found a delightful and amusing weird bride collection item in a store. We're always fascinated by them. Next week, on a little bit darker, but sort of related topic, I have become really frustrated by this narrative that certain segments of the media are pushing that is being bought, hook, line, and sinker, fully embraced and spread, that transgenderism is a mental illness and it's inherently violent, and that there is a massive crime wave involving transgender perpetrators. So, warning, heads up, if referring to some of the horrible things that people are saying is going to be upsetting or hard to listen to, for sure, go in with caution.
Or put on a fun, entertaining, actual play or comedy or actual play comedy podcast and go on a nice nature walk and come back at a different time that is less depressing.
Yes. But anyway, yeah, we're gonna discuss that topic and provide some actual statistics and data and science, which are never effective when directly interacting with these people, but are still helpful to know, because the more people know, maybe the more people can say, you know what, that's not true.
That is incorrect.
That's one of Sienna's favorite things to say. Till then, enjoy summer weather. I keep saying that every time because I'm just giddy that we have some summer weather. We will catch you next time.
Bye. If you found this podcast helpful, interesting, or just mildly amusing, please consider rating and reviewing us on your podcasting platform of choice. It really helps us to get the word out there and spread this information as far as we can.
And as always, check out our website at queerkidsstraightmom.com or visit us on Facebook, Queer Kid Straight Mom, Instagram at queerkid.straightmom, or Twitter at queerkidstr8mom.
And if you're feeling especially generous, please consider joining our Patreon by searching Queer Kids Straight Mom. It helps us fund this podcast.